Hello children, welcome to AIMS India's online classes. Today, from physics subject, friction topic we are going to continue. So here, our concept is regarding types of friction children, types of friction. So if you observe in this diagram, this person is trying to pull the horse, but he is not able to pull the horse because his force, whatever force he is applying, it is not enough. It is not enough to move the horse. Means when the person is applying force, when the person is applying force, when he is go on increasing the applied force, that force will be developed because the horse is not moving. The force between the legs of horse and the floor will be developed into a frictional force. Will be developed into a kind of frictional force. So means here external force is acting. This person is trying to push the horse. That is, applied force is called external force. Though we are applying the external force, but these two surfaces, legs of the horse and floor, surface of the land, they are at relatively rest with each other. So at that time, whatever force developed between these surfaces due to this applied force, whatever friction developed between them, so that is called static friction. That is called static friction. So means the frictional force that exists between the body means between the legs of horse and the surface, means the surface of the land, so long as they are relatively at rest, so long it is not moving, so long it is not moving, when external force act, means when applied force act, means when the person is pulling, so long the person is pulling, so long the land and horse they are at rest position, until that time whatever friction developed between them is called static friction. Means if we apply more force, more amount of static friction will be developed. Like that it will be go on increasing. If the force go on increasing, static friction also goes on increasing. So suppose if the person is not pulling the horse, so when there is no external force, then this static frictional force will be zero because they are not moving. At that time, static frictional force will be zero. If we increase the magnitude, if we apply the force, or if we increase the applied force, then static friction also starts increasing. Static friction also starts increasing. So up to where? Up to a maximum extent called limiting friction. Up to a maximum extent called limiting friction. Means, so suppose if this boy is pushing his sister, who is sitting in this um, vehicle type structure. Suppose at one point, now it is ready to move. Now it is ready to move. If we increase somewhat extra force, it will be start moving. Means at one point, when there is slight increase in the magnitude of external force, the body just starts sliding over the surface. See, now here starts sliding. This structure is starting sliding. Means this force is enough to make it move. If we increase the force more, it will slide continuously. Means the force of friction at the limiting stage, means at the stage at which it is ready to move, that stage is called, that force of friction is called limiting friction. So if we start from force from 0 newtons, it is not moving, 10 newtons not moving, 20 newtons not moving, 30 newtons it is ready to move. So this 30 newtons is considered as limiting friction. So up to 30 we have static friction. So this limiting friction also depends on nature of surfaces, whether he is moving this small vehicle on a flat surface or on smooth surface or rough surface like sand, on that also it will depend. This limiting friction will depend. Next, so we have first type static friction up to movement, it is called limiting friction. When it is ready to move, that friction is called limiting friction, or limiting friction is also called maximum, is also called as maximum static friction. Maximum static friction. Next one, kinetic or sliding friction. So when the external force exceeds the limiting friction, now we have told here up to 30 newtons. At 30 newtons it is ready to move. If we apply 31 newtons, if we apply 32 newtons, it starts moving. So when the external force exceeds the limiting friction, the body just starts sliding like this. The body is moving here. The body is moving here. So the minimum force required to maintain the motion of the body over the other surface is called kinetic friction. Kinetic friction. Once the movement has started, we have to apply less force. So this sliding friction, this sliding frictional force is less than static friction, because for making it move from rest, we have to apply more force. Once it has started movement, we have to apply less force. So that's why the force required to keep in continuous motion, to keep in continuous motion or to maintain the motion is called kinetic friction or sliding friction. Means the frictional force that exists between the two surfaces when they are in uniform relative motion, it is called dynamic friction, sliding friction or kinetic friction. So this kinetic friction is smaller than limiting friction, because from rest to motion, for making it move from rest to motion, more force we have to apply. Already if it is in motion, to continue the motion, less force we have to apply. So kinetic friction is always smaller than limiting friction. Smaller than limiting friction. So next children, we have another kind of friction called rolling friction. Means the frictional force that exists between two surfaces when a body rolls. It is rolling, not sliding, because all parts of the body are coming into touch with the surface while rolling. So that is called rolling friction. While sliding, only the bottom surface will be in touch with the ground, not total. But while rolling, at one instant lower part, next it will change. Total part. At one or other instant, total body will be touch with the ground. So the frictional force that exists between the two surfaces when a body rolls over other surface, it is called rolling friction. So sometimes what happens means, so you see here, observe here carefully. This part is becoming bending, means this part is deforming. Or when you are moving car tire, car on the road, car tire will get compressed. Or when you are moving the car in the sand will get compressed. Either the rolling body or the surface on which it is rolling, they get deformed because of the rolling. So our rolling body itself gets deformed at the point of contact over the surface. See, here you can observe. So different objects are rolling, but this is hard enough, that's why it is not getting deformed. If it is smooth, we can observe deformation in the block. So next one. So variation of frictional force with applied force. Means we are applying force. What happens to the frictional force? At first it will be under rest. So we have to apply force. We have to go on increasing the force. We have to go on increasing the force. The frictional force also goes on increasing up to its movement. Suppose at A point it is ready to move, means it is limiting friction or maximum static frictional force. Up to that moment, we have to go on increasing the force. The force of friction also goes on increasing. When it is ready to move, if we increase some force, then the frictional force will come down. After some time, it will starts moving and frictional force will be constant. Frictional force will be constant. Means the OA part, the OA part, AB part, BE part, OA part, AB part, BE part. This OA part of the graph shows static friction. Means we are applying the force, the static friction also goes on increasing up to certain limit. So this OA part increases with increase in applied force, and this represents static frictional force. So whereas the AP part, sorry, not the AP. Okay, this one. So at A, so we have reached the maximum static frictional force or limiting frictional force where the body is ready to move. This refrigerator is ready to move at one force, and that maximum static frictional force is represented by A. This value, this force value, this frictional force value, we can, if we draw a line perpendicular to applied force, this AP will give force of friction, maximum static frictional force. If the applied force is increased further, the body will continue to be in motion, but the force of friction slightly lesser. If you go on increasing frictional applied force, now what happens? Now refrigerator will start moving, but frictional force reduces to B. Frictional force reduces to B. So after that, if you go on applying force, so what happens? The frictional force will become constant. The frictional force will become constant without any change, and the body will start moving constantly. Body will start moving constantly. So like this, children, like this applied force works on frictional force, or both are related to each other. So in the beginning, applied force increases, frictional force also increases up to maximum level. After reaching the maximum level, though we increase applied force, frictional force will decrease. Though we increase the applied force, frictional force will become constant. Frictional force will become constant. So here, children, rolling friction is smaller than sliding friction, because here a box is sliding. So at that time we can have some friction. Suppose if a ball is rolling, this rolling friction is always less than sliding friction, and sliding friction is less than limiting friction or static friction. Next, children. So this friction is affected by some factors. Friction is affected by some factors. So because of some factors, it will decrease or it will increase. So on what factors it depends means, first one, materials of bodies in contact. So suppose we have kept a block on sand, we have kept, or we have kept a block on ice, we have kept, on sand we have kept. It depends on which materials or what are the materials in contact. Based on that, friction will be less or more. or roughness of surface. Sand means it's a rough surface, friction will be more. Ice means smooth surface, friction will be less. And one more thing, it depends on area of contact. It depends on area of two surfaces in contact. So in rolling friction, the area of contact is very less compared to sliding friction. In rolling friction, area of contact is very less compared to sliding friction. So this is a ball. At some time, only some portion is in contact with ground. But whereas for the block, total bottom surface is in contact with ground. So it depends on area of contact. So limiting friction force is directly proportional to normal reaction. Directly proportional to normal reaction. So whenever you place a block on the ground, so the block pushes the weight of the block acts downwards due to gravity. Weight of the block acts downwards. In the same way, the surface also tries to create one opposition force, normal reaction force in the upward direction. This limiting frictional force is directly proportional to normal reaction. If normal reaction is more, then limiting frictional force will be more. So like that, it depends on, friction depends on materials in contact, roughness of surface, area of contact, and normal reaction between the surfaces. Normal reaction between the surfaces. Next one, we can reduce the friction. We can reduce the friction by making some arrangements. So by using lubricants in the machineries or in the vehicles. So in the vehicles, suppose you have a moped. So your father is having a bicycle or a motorcycle or car, automobile. So we will give the vehicles for servicing. We will give the vehicles for servicing for 2 or 3 months once. We will give a vehicle for servicing. There we will ask him to replace the engine oil. We will ask him to replace the engine oil. So why means this engine oil, if he replaces the engine oil, the mechanic replaces the engine oil go in between the machinery parts and it will reduce the friction between the machinery parts and the machinery parts won't get damaged because of this smoothness. Otherwise, they will become rough. Heat will be produced between them. Heat will be produced between the machinery parts and they will worn out. They will get damaged. So we will make use of some lubricants. Or our mother while making chapati or while making uh, chapati or dosa on the pan. So what she will do, she will apply oil first. She will apply some vegetable oil, then she will prepare dosa. So because of that vegetable oil also, this pan surface will become smoother, so that dosa will come out easily. So vegetable oil also one kind of lubricant. Engine oil, like so many kinds of oils, or boric acid. Normally, while playing carom board, we make use of boric powder. For smoothness, we make use of boric powder, which is formed from boric acid. So that is also one kind of lubricant. So lubricants means in machines or anywhere, by applying lubricants between the contact surfaces. So what they will do means they will fill the fine pores or depressions or irregularities. They will fill the irregularities in the surfaces and they make them smooth. and reduce friction. Or polishing. Suppose, see this ball, how he is making the ball. In the beginning it was rough. In the beginning the ball was rough. But after finally after polishing it like a cork ball, cricket ball, so by polishing what happens? Unevenness of the surfaces can be reduced by polishing. This unevenness can be reduced by polishing. It will become smoother by polishing. So friction will be reduced. Or ball bearings. So between these two surfaces in between, they make use of some balls. So because of balls, rolling friction will be created, which is less than static and sliding friction. So in rotating missions, so shafts are mounted on ball bearings like this. By doing so, rolling friction will occur lesser than sliding friction, thereby friction will be reduced. Or by streamlining, aeroplanes or ships or vehicles are streamlined. Vehicles are streamlined in such a way so that friction of regarding aeroplane means friction by air, because aeroplane is moving in the air, friction will be created by the air. To overcome the friction by air, its shape is specially designed. That shape is called streamlining shape, like fish shape. For the ships also, when they are moving in water, to reduce the friction by water, their shape is specially designed. The front part the front part will be somewhat sharp. The front part will be somewhat sharp so that it can easily penetrate through the water. By specially designing the body of vehicles, so by streamlining their bodies, so we can reduce the friction. We can reduce the friction by either by air or by water. Okay, children. So we have what we have learned today. We have learned about types of frictions, static friction, and maximum static friction is called limiting friction, and the kinetic friction, also called as sliding friction, also called as dynamic friction, which will be created during motion. Rolling friction. During rolling friction, the surface or the body may get deformed, which is less than sliding friction. So a variation between applied force and frictional force. So first applied force will increase, along with that frictional force also will increase up to one maximum extent. After that, frictional force will become less, decrease. After that, it will become constant. So factors affecting friction, mainly materials of contact, roughness of surface, area of contact, normal reaction. How can we reduce friction, children? By using lubricants, by polishing, by using ball bearings, or by streamlining the shape of the body. In this way, we can reduce the friction. So thank you for watching our video, children. Please subscribe our channel and press the bell icon for receiving latest updates. You can visit our website, children, www.aimstoday.in, for other information.